Hi, Courtney. How are you?
I am doing fabulous. Thank you. How are you?
I am doing well, and thank you so much for joining me on Confidence Conversations.
I am so thankful to be here and I look forward to chatting today.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting, and we dive in the same way every time, which is asking, what does confidence mean to you?
True belief in what we're doing, right? I think having that deep burning belief in anything we're getting into is for me, sometimes I'm gonna say I fail at things, right? But I believe in what I'm doing and I fail fast if I do. So I think just having that utter belief in whatever it is that you're diving into, whether it's in your personal life or your work life.
No, I think that that belief is so important. And I kind of view confidence as this fundamental trust, right? Which is kind of the same thing. It's a trust in this unwavering faith in who you are, what you are, and why you're here. And we have to navigate that in different ways sometimes. But like, as long as we have that fundamental trust in that this is the reason, right? We're able to navigate kind of any area of life.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. It's just, wake up with the belief that what we're doing is the right mission. And sometimes things get a little messy, but there's an ultimate path to whatever the lesson is. And so trusting that and just knowing that the path you're on, while in the moment, sometimes it may not seem 100% perfect, right? I think that if you fail fast or you learn from, that path, you end up being able to veer in different directions, which is, the good part of things.
It is a good part of things. And like failing fast, I think a lot of us are like afraid of that word failure. But I don't think, and I'm sure you would agree that like making a mistake or things not happening the way that you foresaw them happening for you, that's not failure isn't final and it's not futile. Like it's an opportunity to learn. So leaning into like this did not work and being able to figure out things from there is so much better than just holding on, because at the end of the day you have that faith and trust in like this is my ultimate purpose. And I think, you know, we have our purpose and that doesn't change, but like the hats we wear and the titles we wear and how we show up in that purposes can differ. And I know that you yourself have worn various hats, and I think that, you know, at the end of the day when people look at you and see your story, they would see a natural born leader. So I would love to learn from you, what are some of the characteristics of a good leader?
Empathy and grace,
Mm.
right? I think one of the biggest things over my years, both when I was in corporate and running a company now, is give yourself grace, give the people that work with you or around you grace. Like we've all got a lot of stuff going on and you can't always see it, And so leading with confidence, but being open to criticism, right? Or to be open to suggestions. Like people look sometimes at me and go, oh gosh, in my business mentoring I do right now with sleep consultants, they're like, you're just so good at all this stuff. I'm like, you make it look so easy. I'm like, don't say easy. It's easy to me because I did it for a long time, but it might not be easy to you. And things that are easy to you aren't easy to me. So it's a learning opportunity, no matter what situation or what level you're in, you're always learning. And I think if you're open to that, it makes you become someone that people want to be around.
Yeah. And I think there's one level of that, which is like showing grace and compassion for others, but also like turning that in towards ourselves, because we are our own worst critics. And sometimes it's hard to get out of our own mind or like veer away from like that voice in our head that's keeping us, you know, held prisoner to imposter syndrome or self-doubt. So how do you kind of navigate that in your life?
I think as it relates to my work life, I am a workaholic. I have been since I was 14. I will never not work, but that's my DNA. I enjoy truly what I do. And I think the secret to that is falling asleep every night feeling joy. In my corporate career, I didn't. Um, and so I made the choice, which was a very scary one, to move out of that into my own company. But that's the question that it really took me the past year of a lot of inner work, a lot of self-discovery, a lot of that imposter syndrome to figure out, how do I lay my head on the pillow every night and feel joy? right? And once I was able to answer that, like, what do I want from life? Is it money? Well, sure, money's great. You can buy things, right? Is it more time with my family? Well, sure. I love hanging out with my family. Is it working? Yeah, I actually love working, so it's like trying to figure out what makes me tick, like all of it, in some aspect of balance, so long as when I go to sleep at night, I feel joy. And that was the revelation that took me a solid year of going back to our church and kind of rekindling my faith. And, it was a very cool journey for me, but it was something that was the end answer, was what do I want out of life is to feel joy when I go to sleep. And if I can do that every night, then I'm in a good place. Doesn't mean I don't have bad days or sometimes cry myself to sleep, depending on the situation. We all have those days, but like as a general rule of thumb, like I just want to feel joy in my day. And when I go to bed, know that I did the best I can, knowing that, frankly, we're not curing cancer and I can pick it up tomorrow and try again.
That's so important. And I think that aspect of joy, what brings joy into my life and how do I want to live, is such an important question, because I think a lot of times we just think about like the what do we want, and it's very like material. Not that material things aren't important, but like how much do I want to make, what title do I want to have, and like all of where do I want to live even. And those things are important and they bring us joy to a certain extent, but how does my life look as a whole, and how am I expressing myself authentically as a human, as a woman, like however you identify, like how am I showing up and authentically, and what does joy mean to me? And I think that, it's easy to just hear a question like that and think, oh, what makes me happy? But I think joy is very different from happiness. Happiness is how I feel when I eat a cookie,
Yeah.
Or I go on vacation, but happiness is fleeting. Joy is something that we truly cultivate in our souls. And so it's really inspiring to see someone like you who has said, I've had all of these great things. You've had a really impressive career, which I want to get into, but tapping into, I can do these things well, but this is what I want to do. And so as you've kind of made that transition from, climbing the corporate ladder and making it as an executive to now being the founder and CEO of Tiny Transitions, how has that sort of transition for you shaped the way that you view success?
Yeah, it has been a tiny transition, right? I think in my 20s, when I was in grad school, I wrote my thesis paper on kaleidoscope career types, it was called. And it was a paper I wrote when I was 23. My mom had just died. I was trying to climb the corporate ladder. And I wrote it as a ignorant 23-year-old with no kids, no boyfriend, just working and school, and I wrote it with this perspective of in my 20s, climbing the corporate ladder, right? Trying to make money and move up and be the thing. And then in your 30s, how you try to find balance. You have a child or your direction changes, right? So you're trying to balance a child and family. And then in your 40s, it's about finding authenticity. And I laugh because I just had a little bit of kind of perspective on that in the past year, going, oh my gosh, almost 20 years ago, I wrote this paper, not knowing what my life would turn into, but I'm living what I wrote when I was 23. And that has changed a lot of my perspective, right? I'm in my 40s now, very early, but I'm in my 40s and I want to be authentic. Like I had a successful career in marketing and sales ops. I was a very good leader. I loved the career, but I didn't feel fulfilled, right? And so after my mom died, I met my husband, started having kids. And then I'm like, my gosh, I see my kids for like 40 minutes a day. This is crazy. Like, hey, good morning. You're going to daycare. Hey, goodbye. And there's still so many of my peers and friends that have that situation. And at the time, it just was like, I want to do something different. I had my son. I was terrible as a parent the first few weeks. I'm super type A, and I didn't really like parenting, right? And people were like, oh, I can't believe you would say that. I wasn't good at it. I didn't know what I was doing. I had this baby 2 days old crying. And I'm like, what is this? Like, I miss sleep. I miss work. I want to go back to work. And, I remember a very candid conversation with my husband where like, I'm going back to work at 6 weeks. He's like, you're staying home till 12. I'm like, then you stay home, And I just like, I didn't fall in love with parenting right away. Right. And around 8 weeks, I was like, I've got to change something because this isn't working for me. And I met with a sleep consultant and I didn't know what that was. And I got off the phone with her and she's like, actually, you're doing great. Your kid's good. They're where they should be. Like, you don't need to hire me. Okay. But when I hung that phone up, it was where my world just turned into this tornado of like, I want to do that because I felt so elated just from validation that I wasn't a failure. Right. And I think that was my biggest shift in like perspective for not only where I was in life, I was now a mom with a family and stuff, but just in like, I want to do something that makes me feel authentic. Like I want to feel joy in the families I'm helping and the impact. Like I just spent 15 minutes on the phone with somebody and they totally changed my whole life in the moment. Right. And I was like, I got to do that. And so I just started researching like this career in the field and I became a lactation counselor and a postpartum doula and all this different stuff. Right. And it just, from there, it's been so transformational for me, and that was over 8 years ago now.
Yeah. And so how did you actually make that transition? Because there's the spark, right, that you felt when you got off of the phone, but then going from an executive who's worked your way up this corporate ladder to then leaving our identity at the door, I would say not your identity, but your ego aside to say, I'm going to pursue what I'm passionate about. What was that inner dialogue like? Because I think a lot of times we have these things that we want to do or we know would just light us on fire, but this is what I've done and this is what I do and this is where my identity is wrapped up in.
Yeah, definitely. I would say first research, right? Like, is this viable? I do like making money. So can I make money doing this? Right. And then what does it look like? And could I do it on the side initially and do consulting, right? Like a lot of my friends do consulting in a variety of anything you can consult, right? So I did it on the side for about 5 years and worked nights, worked weekends, kind of just slowly built the business. And, it was funny because, I left the corporate career for a smaller startup and, my boss at the time, who was the CEO, was like, you can do it on the side, like whatever, and that was my first, like, I would say remote position, right? Like fully remote, running sales operations for a startup. And then I had that flexibility where I could do my own schedule, and it was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then when COVID hit, it was like, okay, I can't do full-time 2 jobs. And if I'm ever going to do this, the time is now. And that was at about 5 years in, because I was scared. I was scared of failing. I was scared of leaving a lot of money on the table. Right. And my husband earns a good living, but I am someone who will always work. It is in my DNA. I always want to be in that position. And that's a personal thing from my upbringing and things that have happened in my own family that will always make sure I'm financially able to care for myself. But it was scary, but I was also failing. COVID, I think for a lot of people, just dropped a bomb on like what was going on. I mean, I had 2 kids. One was in preschool, one was in first grade. I was working 2 full-time jobs. My husband was a essential employee and he's in the construction space, right? He's the CFO for a lumber company. So they never closed. So he was gone every morning at 5. And now I'm left with 2 full-time jobs and COVID. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I had a situation with a family member who made a comment about something that was totally inappropriate. And I was like, you have no idea what my day is like, and what I'm managing. And I had like a breakdown that night. Like I didn't say anything to the comment, but I went inside and just like a shell, just started bawling and was like, I'm failing at parenting. I'm apparently failing at parenting in your eyes. I'm failing at work. And I'm failing at all of it. Like I can't continue to do this. And I left the beach at 3 a.m. that night. Just told my husband I was driving home. Like, you got the kids. Like, I got to get out of here. I called my girlfriend Louise in Singapore, who's a sleep consultant. And I just sobbed the whole way home. And I was like, Louise, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm failing at all of this, but yet I've always been successful. Like, how do I manage this? She's like, what do you control, Courtney? What can you control? And I'll tell you, I came home that day and was like, I can control private school. They're going to go to private school in the fall because they're going to school. The public school I knew wasn't. And the private Catholic school was, and I was like, cool, you're going to Catholic school. And, my husband, I was raised Catholic. My husband was not. And he's like, they're not going to Catholic school. And I'm like, okay, great. Then you can be home every other day and I'll work every other day. He's like, Catholic school sounds terrific, So in the moment, I think a lot of parents made that decision, but that was really the turning point, frankly, of all of it. I didn't obviously like COVID. I loved what our family became during COVID. We went for family walks every day and we played board games and we did puzzles. And then I worked when I could, which because I was consulting, I could do it at the hours I chose that my clients then had to agree to versus me always being on the other end of pleasing the whole world. And it was just such a mindset shift for me that day, coming home at 3 a.m. And I was like, I control this. I can control this. I can't control that. I got to let go of that. And I'm going to retire from that, So we had enough savings that we could just say, you know what, take the hit for a couple months. You've been doing this for 5 years and you're doing well. Imagine what you could do if you did it full time. And so I took the risk and was like, all right, so if this fails, right, which I didn't go into the quitting of my corporate gig as though it would, but I was valuable. So, all right, you take 6 months off and you go back if it doesn't work. That's what my husband says. Courtney, try it. If it doesn't work, you go back to work, And I'm like, yeah, okay. And it's just been ever since. So, you got to take risks sometimes. I didn't know if I would succeed. I felt and believed, and I was confident that I would, but being an entrepreneur is not easy. I live, breathe, eat, sleep, everything I'm doing all the time. My brain doesn't shut off. And, sometimes I get frustrated. I'm like, I'm just going back to corporate, I'm shutting it all down. But I don't want that. I want to go to my kids' lunch duty once a week for a half hour and open their chocolate milk or whatever. I want to be able to take the dog for a walk if I want at 2:00 on a Tuesday. So there's that pros and cons of both. But it was quite a transformation, I would say, internally for me the past 3 years, because so much has happened in our world and it has shifted my perspective. But it's also given me a new and what I feel is a better perspective. There's a lot of stuff that's happened in my life that has not been awesome, but I am who I am today because of those experiences. And that has made me the person I am, which I'm super proud of. So I would never take those experiences away. I mean, I wouldn't wish them on people, but they made me who I am. So I'm proud of that because I like who I am.
Right. And I think you raised so many really good and valid points here. One is we can't control all of the things that happen to us. But the question your friend from Singapore asked you of what can I control, I think is key. And starting back even with the question that you asked initially, which is what brings me joy. So you have an understanding, a fundamental understanding of what brings me joy, what is my passion, what sets my heart on fire. And then you ask yourself, what can I control? What can I do to facilitate that joy for myself and those around me? And what needs to go? And we start to analyze our lives in a way that really starts to make sense, because everything seems so necessary and everything's a priority and everything is important, but you can't control everything. And even the priorities need to be prioritized. And so ourselves at the top of that list, we really start to gain perspective as to, okay, this is what I need to do going forward. Was there any part of you that felt okay, I'm doing this, I'm making this decision? I know that there was a little apprehension, but you were confident in yourself. But how do you act on that? What does it mean to take a leap of faith?
I think it goes back to the confidence. I believed in my product or service that I was doing in this case, right? It's sleep consulting. I knew I had the business background. So I understood the fundamentals of running a business and building a business and the marketing and the social and the sales ops. So foundationally, I felt like I was set. It was a new market. And how are you finding those people and how are you building relationships? Because like anything, it's a lot of relationships, right? Much of our referral base is because of past clients or pediatricians that saw the value in what we were doing that was different, right? My motto in everything in my life is do it different and do it better, right? And so my mind is constantly going because I don't want to follow anybody, right? I want to be a leader in whatever the thing is that I'm going through, whatever the experiences that I have in my life. Like, I don't want pity. I want to figure out the way to think through, how can I look at this differently? How can I do it differently? How can I change my perspective on it? Like, I'm definitely a glass half full person. So, it's just having that, I think that mindset around it has served me in so many aspects of my life,
And I think a part of that is like, how do you bring diversity into the field through what you do? And I think one of the things that I talk about in addition to confidence is diversity. And there's the diversity that we see, like, I am a woman, I am a Black woman, but then there's invisible layers of diversity, the things that we go through, the experiences, the perspectives that we have that really shape our view of the world and how we experience it. So I would love to know about some of your experiences and invisible layers of diversity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the weirdest that most people probably would be like, okay, I've got to Google this, is my neighbor got breast cancer. So she had the BRCA gene. Her mom died from breast cancer that was caused by BRCA. And my mom died when I was 25. And so I remember the genetic doctor at the time was like, you should get genetic testing. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, I'm 25. I got more important things to do. And I never did. So my neighbor gets breast cancer. I go to the local hospital here, Mainline Health in Philly. And I was like, I should, my whole family has cancer on my mom's side. Everybody died from cancer. And I told my husband at the time, joking, but kind of serious, right? Keeping a little levity to it, throw a dart on different type of cancers on a dartboard. I'm going to get one of them, right? Just so you know what you're marrying into. And so I got genetic testing just on a whim, kind of like, I'm 36 now. I should probably have done that, 10 years ago. Let me just make sure everything's cool. I actually thought I'd get a colonoscopy at 40. That was my whole motivation going in. Turns out I have a super rare genetic mutation, and that people at Paley Hospital, where I had the testing, were like, we've never seen anybody pop positive with this. Like, we can't help you here. And so I get home, and it was called CDH1, which is a relatively new genetic mutation, but it causes hereditary diffuse gastric cancer. My mom died from stomach cancer, but at the time we thought it was just stomach cancer. So fast forward, Google, they're like, the genetic counselor who called me that day, about an hour before I was going to an in-home sleep consultation where I was spending the entire night with the family, goes, we're going to cut your breasts off, and then we're going to cut out your stomach. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, number one, you can't live without a stomach. And number two, I'm good. Like, I do yoga 5 days a week. I'm like super healthy, eat clean. Like, I'm good. And I start Googling like CDH1, and they're like, no, we're going to cut your stomach out. And I found a doctor. Luckily, I'm in Philly, which is amazing because the hospitals around here are great. And there's a doctor who specializes in CDH1. And there's only like 4 hospitals in the country that do. And I emailed him, and he's like, no, I'll see you tomorrow at 8:00. I'm like, whoa, okay. And I showed up at Penn the next morning, and he's like, no, we're going to cut your stomach out, and we're going to do a double mastectomy, and this is going to kill you in a couple of years, and you start looking at the stats, and it's like, you're going to die basically. So they actually cut out my stomach and my brother's on the same day 4 years ago. Like, I found out, and then he immediately found out, and we were both positive. Cut it out preventatively, right? Which I didn't even know was a thing, but that's the recommended course of medical treatment, which again, it's pretty rash. Like, they're cutting your entire stomach out. And it turns out I already had stage 1 stomach cancer and had no idea. So I made a choice to cut my stomach out, and then try to be positive about it while I have 2 toddlers at home and I'm working full time. Right. And my husband's like, they're not cutting your stomach out, and then he came to the appointment. He's like, oh, they are going to cut your stomach out. Okay. Like, we're going to navigate this. And that was a huge, like, what? Like, what are you talking, what are you talking about? And it was a very crazy 4 years, right? Like, I'm still healing. I eat normal food. People always ask me, like, what do you do? Can you eat, And I can, I eat smaller amounts. Like, my intestines attached to my esophagus. I have no stomach. I did have stomach cancer from it, and I had no idea. And it would have killed me now, which is so crazy that, like, that experience alone, I was very positive about it, right? Like, it sucks. Getting your stomach cut out is not an easy thing, but I used it as an opportunity to educate myself, to help now educate others. I talk to every single gastrectomy patient at Penn that goes through the same doctor, because every one of them has to call me and go, can you really live without a stomach? You're doing it really well. And the doctor's like, you are like amazing, with how you did this. And I think a lot of it, like, it was hard, but it's mindset, right? Like I always came into it like, well, I don't want to die. So can I live without a stomach? Can I still eat steak? And so, well, cheese doesn't necessarily agree with me. I can drink my coffee and eat my steak and live a relatively normal life. But that was a crazy, like, honestly, like life altering experience that I still, like, my kids have to get tested. They have no idea. We won't talk to them about it till they're 20, but they'll probably have their stomachs cut out too. But by then, hopefully it's not an open procedure. It's more laparoscopic, but it's it's some just crazy weird thing that every doctor I see has to Google because they have no idea what the heck it is or have never heard of it unless they watched like a Grey's Anatomy episode where they happen to have a patient with CDH1. So it's like, that was a huge change in the middle of already this like storm of stuff going on around the world,
But I think it like you everything that you do is centered around that question of what can I control? And that was the piece that you had the power to control. And you also had the power to control your mindset. And I go back to Michael Beckwith sometimes, and he says, believe the diagnosis, not the prognosis. And so I would love to hear about what mindset or hacks or mindfulness hacks like got you through that time, because it's one thing to get through and be on the other side of it, but I know that that was probably very real and difficult on a day-to-day basis. So how did you kind of walk and navigate and guide yourself through that time?
Acceptance, right? Like you have to grieve, like I'm losing my stomach. What does that mean? Right. And most people who go through that have to go on a feeding tube. Some don't come off the feeding tube because they can't figure out how. Like, it is a very real surgery. This is not gastric bypass, which I've never had, but they're totally like, they cut my entire stomach is gone. Right. So it's a very different and very minimal known surgery, I guess, if that makes sense, because the people that have gastrectomies, right, are typically stomach cancer patients who are dying. So they will take their stomach out to kind of slow the cancer, but it kills them. And for me, I'm a 38-year-old at the time, healthy female with the clean eating there, you know what I mean? And so in the moment, what are my options? What could I control? I couldn't control the genetic cancer. And they're like, this cancer is in the middle layer of your stomach. In every patient we've done the surgery on, the cancer was already in there at your age, and it will kill you. You have an 85% chance of getting it and a 5% survival rate. And then with the breasts, this gene is triple kind of threat, if you will. So it's breast, colon, stomach, right? So the most pervasive was the stomach, but then naturally your colon, because you're flowing everything down there, and then the breast, and it impacts the stomach and the breast in the same way. It's the middle layer of the tissue. So it's hard to find it. It's not like you could do an endoscopy and they could find it. And the doctor's like, it's like going to a football field and pulling 6 blades of grass. Like, we're never going to catch it until it's a tumor, and it killed my mom almost instantly. So it was one of those where it's like, look at the facts and go, okay, what can I control in this? Can I live without a stomach? Yes. Is it going to suck? Yes. But how do I do this? And then it was like, I know a lot about nutrition because I've always been healthy. And I'm like, okay, I need protein and fat. Okay. And I would say we're all on different journeys. Like, my aunt found out I had it, and it's my mom's sister. She tested positive for it. She had her stomach out a month later. We live very different lives, right? She's vegan now. I still eat meat. She can eat dairy, no problem. Dairy for me does not end well, right? So even the doctors, like, I have a GI genetic oncologist at Penn, and he's like, we can't help you to know what to eat because everybody's different. So even still on this journey, like, I just yesterday was like morning cheese because I'm like, I really think I need to give up dairy, but I don't want to, and I'm like, so today I'm morning, and then tomorrow I'm starting Whole30. So, which I pretty much eat anyway, but I love cheese. And so it's just, I think it's that, like, just the perspective of like, if I don't do this, it's going to kill me. But if I do this, I just got to figure out how to navigate it. Like, some days I was crying on the toilet going, why did I do this? And I got 2 toddlers running around trying to work. But then the days where I felt good. I'm like, I'm so blessed that I did this because I don't have to wake up every day wondering if the cancer's in there yet. Right. And so that for me, it's like, take my boobs, they weren't there anyway. So throw whatever you can shove in and call it a day. And that's what I did. I had my stomach done Did a gastrectomy where they took my stomach and then my gallbladder. I don't know the fancy medical term for that. But they did that December 6th in 2018. And then March 20th, it was 3 days after my daughter's birthday, I had a double mastectomy and they did an immediate reconstruction. I'm like, I don't care what they look like. Just shove something in. I don't want to come back here. I'm not getting pumpy things that you fill up. I'm like, I'm surgeried out and I'm 97 pounds. Like I need to focus on getting healthy. And that's what, like, I sit now and eat a cup of nuts pretty much every day to keep my weight on. But like, I feel really good, but I think your attitude is what helps you through any of these situations. Like it's a very different journey. My brother and I were both on the same journey. We had our stomachs cut out the same day. His journey has been totally different than mine. And yet we have each other to lean on, which has been such a blessing because there's nobody else that's like us. There's like, 1,500 of us in the world. It's not like you have a big, a big village for something like this. Even the doctor's like, well, we can't really help you. Good luck. Try to eat healthy, but
beautiful that you're able to be that community for other people who do go to your physician, because we all need someone to be able to lean on. And I think that your point of listening to your body and what your body is telling you in the context of your health, but also just in life, because our bodies speak to us in so many different ways. And one thing that our body needs is sleep. So I want to make a tiny transition into the work that you do today and talk about sleep for a minute. I know that the recommendation is 7 to 8 hours a night, but why is sleep important? How is it important? And what happens when we're not getting adequate sleep?
Yeah. I mean, if you were looking at it from an adult perspective, like it is the most important thing that any of us can do. Right. And I think the biggest challenge, technology, right? And so creating the environment, right, where you're getting good sleep. Like our phones, they are not welcome in our bedroom. We do not watch TV. We read good old fashioned books and we go to bed every night at the exact same time, right? Routine, structure, consistency, like anything else in life, it becomes a habit. And our body is a lot of hormones, right? You got adrenaline, you got cortisol, you got melatonin, right? And you've got this thing called adenosine, right? So it's like sleep pressure. Our kids have it too. But as adults, I think we're more in tune to it because like we're either sleeping well or not sleeping. My husband's 42 and his 2 a.m. wake ups where he's like, I can't fall back to sleep. And then I get pissed and then I lay there, and turns out his cortisol levels are like totally off alignment because his adrenals are fatigued. He only knew that because he went to my functional nutritionist, Other times people just try to figure it out on their own. And I think just recognizing the importance of sleep. They say, typically 2 or 3 days of 5 hours of sleep or less is the equivalent on your brain as being intoxicated, right? So when I talk to parents, like I work with adults, I work with children, mostly children, but like when you explain that to somebody, it's like, would you want to be hammered every day going to work? Most people don't, right? But like, that's what your brain is thinking is happening, right? And so much from sleep deprivation, like our emotional stability, our cognitive function, right? Our emotional regulation, the ability for us to grow and develop. Like as adults, we recognize some of those things, right? If you're tired, you don't feel like going to the gym. If you're tired, your brain's not focusing at work. You might make poor decisions or, God forbid, something that is a decision that can harm someone, right? Dozing at the wheel or whatever, right? And I mean, there's so many. As kids, they operate the same. They just can't always express it. Like kids don't necessarily know that they're tired, or they don't realize as parents that like broken sleep in kids has the same impact, right? How you feel in the morning after your kid's been up 7 times is the exact same way that your kids feel. They just can't express it. Or if they do, it's through outbursts, crying, poor eating, like all these things are connected. Sleep is the foundation for which the house is built. I say that and have said that for years because you can't build a house on a rocky structure, or when the wind blows, it's going to fall over.
Yeah. What you said resonates because I'm like, well, basically I'm drunk right now then because I've been sleeping very poorly this week and just working. And I think we need to be more intentional, and myself especially, about prioritizing sleep. There's all of these like self-care tips, and I'm very heavy on self-care, but we've got to include in that sleep, and it should probably be higher up on the list. So how can we do a better job? I know you mentioned, get rid of the electronics in the bedroom. What other things can we do to prioritize our sleep and ensure that we're getting a good night's rest?
I think it's routine. Kids love routine. Despite the pushback, they like to understand what's coming, right? So having a set bedtime and a set routine, because it creates consistency for them, right? I often use little timers, right? Where I'll say, all right, in 5 minutes, we're going up, when the penguin goes off, and when it goes off, everybody runs upstairs, like we create the environment. And then as adults, there was a period where after my stomach cancer, my son thought I was dying. And he would fall asleep on the stairs because he wanted to hear my voice to know that I was still alive. And it was heartbreaking as a parent. So my husband and I actually, instead of putting the kids down and going back downstairs, we just started staying in the bedroom and we would start reading. And that's how we kind of got into the habit we are today, where by 9 o'clock, we're both passed out and we're both up at 5 o'clock for the day. But it started because of that, because I didn't want him having anxiety going to sleep that mommy wasn't going to be alive when he woke up. Like, that's heartbreaking for a 5-year-old. And so creating consistency and routine, right? Eliminating blue light, tablet, TV, phones, they impact the frontal part of the brain for up to an hour. You cannot settle blue light glasses. They help, but your brain is still stimulated. It thinks that you are trying to stay awake, right? The right schedule, looking at not taking naps, or if you're taking a nap, make sure it's very limited because it messes with your hormones. If your hormones are out of alignment or you don't have a schedule, like tonight it's 10, tomorrow it's midnight, right? Your body doesn't know when to fire what it's supposed to fire, right? So when you wake in the morning, it's making adenosine, which is sleep pressure, right? You've got to build enough of that to be able to go to bed. And then at bedtime, darkness creates melatonin, natural hormone, okay, that your body is producing. And it's peaking when darkness comes in, right? And then naturally wears off throughout the night. But then you have adrenaline and cortisol, right? Stress, fight or flight, all those different things. And the back half of the night between 4 and 6 in the morning is our lightest stages of sleep. So if there's ambient light coming in, if, you're in New York and you hear, like, every time I go to New York, I get the hotel with the truck at 4 that's like, beep, beep, beep. I'm like, ugh. So I bought the most expensive earplugs ever because I'm like a super strict about sleep, and, it's like creating that environment that like sets you up for success, but also like unwinding. Like, what do you like to do? My kids and I fall asleep every night to a product called Zenimal. And it's a device-free meditation turtle. They make them for kids and adults. I've become beautiful friends with the founder. She's lovely, but the product's awesome because a kid can put it on themselves, an adult can put it on themselves, but that started as a kid product, and they can learn mindfulness that helps them to relax versus laying in bed going, I don't want to go to sleep, And my kids, I found the product when my son was struggling to like recognize mommy wasn't going to die. And I use it with all of my like children's sleep clients now, as far as like toddlers go, because it just helps kids to like reset. And I think as adults, it's like super helpful, and it's avoiding the obvious stuff, avoiding the caffeine, avoiding your phone in your room. Oh, I need it for a clock. You know what? Go to Target, buy one for $10. You know what I mean? Like, keep the device downstairs, buy a sound machine, buy a clock, like creating the repetition, but also looking internally at our bodies. Like you mentioned a little bit, like something's been going on the past week. Like you got to look at where your hormones are firing, right? My husband had no idea what the heck adrenal fatigue was, until he got some saliva tests from my functional nutritionist. And she was like, yeah, so your cortisol is peaking at like 2 a.m. Your adrenals are exhausted. Take these supplements to try to rebalance your adrenal function. Like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is just in a realm that we don't know. And so I think you have to look at, is it medical? Sleep apnea, right? Is there something clinical that you've got to look at? Is it habit-based? Well, I want to lay on my phone and watch TikTok for 3 hours, right? Or is it something internally that we can't necessarily see, but that is controlling us, right? Kids, when they're teenagers, their melatonin doesn't peak till 10:30 or 11 at night. It's called the adolescent health paradox. And a lot of parents get mad because their kids are staying up, but their body physically can't go to sleep, right? Even without the devices. So I think as parents, it's our job to recognize that it's important for us to sleep. But as kids, I think it's equally important for parents to understand, like, chronic sleep deprivation for you and kids is not healthy, right? And it's a balance of understanding why sleep isn't working, right? Is it a sleep regression? When will my baby sleep through the night? what is this ideal nap schedule? Like all these questions I get on a daily basis. And it really comes down to like, each child is different, right? But it's like routine, consistency, structure, right? Boundaries, like even at a young age, like I have an 11-week-old right now that's waking twice at night just to eat and puts herself right back to sleep. And the parents are like, this is insane. And we didn't have to do any sleep training. It's just understanding like a kid's needs and helping them to build the skill of good sleep. And I think that's the part people don't understand. Like as adults, as kids, like sleep's a skill set. And if we teach ourselves the wrong way to fall asleep, or you just pass out watching TV or what, you know what I mean? Like your body's trained to kind of understand that. So I think it's looking at it from is it a clinical issue? Is it a habit issue? Or is it, more of like a routine or structure, or some kind of issue there?
That's so helpful. And you've given us a really like broad framework to use to assess our own sleep schedules. And I know I need to like look into that myself. So help us understand how you help your clients and the ways that you work with them.
Absolutely. So it started with in-home sleep consultations with new parents and expecting parents, and just providing education, right? I went back and became a lactation counselor. I became a certified sleep consultant. And then I went back and became a postpartum doula. Though I didn't want to practice doula work, I wanted to have a well-rounded picture for families because I saw the gap as a parent that was there for new families, right? I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a village. My mom was dead. I'm home with this baby who's 2 days old and I want to shove him back up in there, right? And so I took that as my mission. I never wanted a parent to feel like I did when I came home with my son. And it has since grown, right? So we do virtual sleep consulting all over the world. I have clients of all ages. I work with expecting parents, current parents. I have a team of 10 amazing sleep consultants. They work in Spanish. They work with adults. I have the only male pediatric sleep coach in the country. We're just trying to do things different and better in the way we support families. I've got we talked a little bit about earlier before we popped on here, the first mobile app for sleep training that we're putting the final touches on. And hopefully that's going to be available this spring. I want parents to have accessibility to content, to education, and to coaching, because that's the part that's the missing piece. You can buy ebooks out there and try to take care of it yourself, but I want people to feel a community, right? I want to be the tribe for them. And so with the work myself and my team do, it's just really beautiful because we work with newborns and infants and toddlers and school age kids and adults. And I do corporate coaching for adults without kids, corporate coaching for the parents at work who are sitting there falling asleep at their laptops because their kids aren't sleeping. And so the really neat thing is I think sleep deprivation impacts all of us in some way, right? Sadly, because it's the first thing to go, right? We always shortchange sleep when we're hitting a deadline or when we're stressed about something or when we've got to get things done. And that's always the first thing that you deprioritize. So I think it's important that we reprioritize it. And then some of those other things take a back burner, and I use the term and have since I was in corporate before the stomach cancer to say, you know what, we're not curing cancer. Like my team at the time and my team now, I'm like, is this going to be there in the morning? And is anybody dying? No. Okay, great. Like we'll finish the brochure tomorrow, and I think having some like realistic expectations, because I feel like today so many employees have a lot of demands and pressures and family and everybody's trying to do it all, right? And if you do it all, you leave nothing for yourself, and you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's like just sitting down and going, what do I want? How do I prioritize that? And then what can I control? Right. So it goes back to that.
Yeah. We've taken like a full circle in this conversation, which I love. So before I let you go, do you have any final words of wisdom for us?
I'm always full of wisdom. Some people might not think so, but no, I mean, I think prioritize, right? Sit down and figure out what brings you joy. It took me a year to figure that out. So it might not be a 5-minute exercise, right? But give yourself the grace to like learn that mission and learn what in your life is going to help you to feel joy. And then what can you control, right? So If your child isn't sleeping well, reach out. We're happy to help. If you're not sleeping well, reach out, talk to your doctor. Like, what things can you control? And are you causing some of those certain things? I think some of us are reluctant to change behaviors because change is hard. And it takes time for new habits to stick. But if you truly believe in what you're doing, right, and for the greater good of yourself or your body or your kids, it's a beautiful thing when you come out, on the other side.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Confidence Conversations. This has been a blast.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, so good. Let me stop the recording. If I can find the button. There we go.
Sorry, I get a little like